This is already bullshit. That's the observation of a bamboo stick. Like, you couldn't be more obvious. What is Scientology? I think we can start watching it, and then, since I have some personal experience about them, at some point where I feel like putting it, maybe it's at the end, I don't know, I will talk about it. So, let's see this. What is Scientology?
Today we're diving into a religion for the first time, focusing on Scientology.
Religion.
I'm going to try to remain unbiased and give you a look at what...
I mean, it is religion. It's considered to be a religion, right? I think.
The Church of Scientology says, what other people might say about it, and hopefully it'll give you an idea of who they are and what they believe. I will bring up controversies about Scientology, but by doing so, I'm not agreeing with or endorsing any arguments. Before we dive in,
I am endorsing the arguments, okay? Let's go.
I do want to clarify that Scientology is not the same as Christian Scientists, as they're often confused. So let's start at the beginning. Scientology was developed...
It only says it's a religion to avoid paying taxes, because churches don't have to pay taxes at all in the US. I think not only in the US, right? In many countries.
By an author named L. Ron Hubbard. This is important and is the first controversy already, as L. Ron Hubbard was an established author known for works of fiction, mostly science fiction. Over his lifetime, he published over 600 fiction pieces, including both short stories and novels, and he holds the Guinness World Record for the author with the most published works.
And are they trash? I'm actually curious, because you can write many books, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you are a good writer. As much as I've heard, it's mostly garbage, okay?
So as we get into the religion aspect of Scientology, you can see that people might not believe the religious texts that he wrote following so many works of science fiction. Hubbard was a United States veteran serving as a Navy officer during World War II and commanding 2 ships, but was removed from his post because his superiors found him incapable of command. In one of these...
Incapable of command, okay. I can vibe with this guy, sadly.
Instances, he fired upon a Japanese submarine that no one else saw and could later find no proof of. The other instance involved him firing...
I mean, that's huge, though. He fired up on a Japanese submarine that no one else saw and could...
No one else saw and could later find no proof of.
Jesus Christ. The first signs of something fishy.
No one else saw and could later find no proof of. The other instance involved him firing upon an island that turned out to belong to Mexico, an ally of the United States. The Church of Scientology gives a lot of weight to his military career, as his injuries and near-death experiences were partially responsible for his ability to see the truth of things and create the foundation for their belief set.
Weird glasses. True. Weird glasses. It's off. He's already out of the game.
The Church of Scientology also disputes a lot of records about Hubbard, including medical...
He went below the average IQ of a sponge. I think he was not stupid, right? Based on this, but he certainly had a little deficiencies, probably. Not certainly, probably.
Records, and even says that sections are falsified to protect his possibly secret activities as an intelligence officer. These Navy records also dispute many of the injuries that he claims to have suffered. We move forward in time, where throughout the 1930s and 40s Hubbard continued to write, but also began to experiment more with the occult, including practicing as a hypnotist and diving into other religious acts that are somewhat...
He looks like a bald Trump, as if Trump was combined with one of those like Muppet Show figures, but went bald.
Unconventional. And in 1950 we have the arrival of his book, Dianetics, the modern science of mental health. This year is crucial for Scientologists, the beginning of everything. Dianetics is focused on a technique still used today in Scientology called auditing. Either through conversation or through a machine called an e-meter, these professionals would help the patient recall past traumas and get through them or over them, removing the emotional trauma of past memories in a process called clearing.
So, first personal bit. Just so you know the background. So what happened? Young Mara got her university diploma from English culture or English studies. But my first jobs were not really about teaching or anything like that. I worked in the service industry a little bit. Like I was a shop assistant. I had like different jobs. I was not really finding my place. And then one day, I saw this random advertisement on Facebook about a language school that was looking for teachers. And I was like, I kind of have this diploma. Like, why wouldn't I give it a try? And they said it in the advertisement that they did not require a university diploma. They just required high level of English. And I was like, that's a little bit weird, but whatever. Let's see. I applied for the job, sent like an email or something. And I'm not even kidding. 10 minutes later, I got a phone call asking me to go to the school for an interview. I went there. Everything seemed fine. They seemed to be all right, a little bit enthusiastic, but I thought it was just like their general vibe. But it was fine. They tested my knowledge in a way. There was like a personal discussion or a conversation with one of the leaders there in English, and also I had to do a test, which was very easy. I was like, that's weird, but okay, all right. I did the test, and it was obviously nice. I passed it. So I had the conversation and they liked me and they immediately offered me the job, which was not paying very well, but I was like, whatever, let's have it. Let's just try it. Let's see how it goes. But I couldn't teach immediately. First of all, I had to go to some kind of a center. That was when they told me that it was actually related to Scientology. It was not needed for me to like read anything Scientology related or be part of the church or anything. I just had to go there because they wanted to have like some kind of a conversation before I start working there, something like that. That's where I met this e-meter thingy, first time and the last time ever. I had to go into a room where there was one dude who later became like one of my bosses, and he gave me this weird machine that had two pieces of metal that you needed to hold like this. Not bean cans, lol. Not bean cans. Not bean cans. So they gave me like two of these metal handlers, I don't know. And they started asking me questions. I don't really remember the questions, but it was weird. I was holding the thing and they were like measuring something. I had no idea what was going on. I answered the questions and they said good. I was like, okay. And I left. They said everything is fine. I should go downstairs, and that was like a big room, a library there. And they immediately started teaching me some stuff about how if I don't know a word in English, I should look for a word in like a dictionary that describes the word in English, and if I don't understand something in there, I should look for that word that I didn't understand in the definition, and so on. I was like, I know this. That's how I had learned English until that point, right? But they kept smiling at me, and they were like, oh, that's very well done. But they also gave me 2 Aaron Hubbard books, and I had to read a specific section in those books and like comprehend them and tell them what they were about. And I did that. And I explained. And they were like, it's not really what it is about. And they gave me like some kind of a foggy explanation that was not very easily understandable. But I was like, yeah, sure, I understand totally. Because I wanted to leave. I felt like it was bullshit. Like I didn't want to be there. So I just told them that I understand totally. Everything is fine. And they said, that's very good. And then I left because there was nothing else. A few days later, they told me that in order for me to be a teacher there, I need to travel to Prague, the Czech Republic, because there will be a 2-week-long course for me to know how to teach. And I was like, yeah, sure. I hadn't really had that much experience at that point. So I went there. What they started teaching me was not really the general teaching techniques, I think, but more like how to teach a very specific way, which was using sentence patterns and doing drills with the students. You know, it's like you command the students to stand up, do this, do that, to teach them to behave as like a soldier or something. It was so weird. But they also taught me, as I said, like sentence patterns and how the whole system worked in a way that the students were not supposed to think, but they were supposed to learn these patterns about, these were like everyday situations, like how to go to a shop and buy something. So they like basically learned the patterns, but they didn't think. They learned the patterns and they learned what they can like substitute there, like what kind of words they can put there. There was like an exam at the end. It was not very difficult. One funny thing though is like the teachers that taught me how to teach, they were proud to be able to use the third conditional. You know, the third conditional, when you say something that, if this had not happened, I wouldn't have done this and stuff. And when they were talking to me and they used the third conditional, they were like, oh, that's a third conditional. They were proud of you. I was like, you're a teacher. What do you mean? It's like, that's just a fucking third conditional. It's like intermediate English. It's like nothing, not even intermediate English. It's like not very high level English. But whatever. I did the exam. And then I came back and they said, okay, now you can have a little group of people that you can teach. And I will continue the story later on, like how it went. But let's go with the video a little bit.
Professionals would help the patient recall past traumas and get through them or over them, removing the emotional trauma of past memories in a process called clearing.
I didn't have this. I have no idea what this is, but I think the e-meter, that was the machine that I had in my hands.
This e-meter picks up on signals from the body in the same way that a
Yes, exactly, like that. Yeah. But like an older version or something, like made of aluminium or something. I don't know what it is made of, but not it wasn't that shiny.
Graph lie detector might, and it tells the auditor what phrases or memories trigger negative feelings and when they can conclude certain conversations. Initially, they hoped to get this process approved in the larger world of medicine, but these proposals were rejected. At this time, Hubbard also coined a term, thetan, which is essentially our soul, but it's immortal, and it allows us to tap into past lives and potentially past traumas from those lives that still might affect us. Dianetics is part of Scientology, but Dianetics in itself is not the religion, but rather one way to enhance the religious experience.
The average man is up against certain problems. He's asking himself certain questions. How can I make more money? How can I make my wife faithful to me? How can I make my children grow up? How can, in other words, how can I live a better life? How can I
want to actually analyze these sentences a little bit, but I think this is already bullshit. The average man is up against certain problems. He's asking himself certain questions. That's the observation of a bamboo stick. Like, you couldn't be more obvious.
How can I make more money? How can I make my wife faithful to me?
How can I make my wife faithful to me? What do you mean? How can you make your wife? Like, you're not making your wife faithful. Your wife just loves you. How can I make more money? Yeah, I bet that was like the first thing. Chain to the basement would work. Yeah, definitely. Goddamn.
How can I make my children grow up?
You feed them, you love them, and you provide necessary education. That's it. They grow up. That's like that in their nature. They like small and they become bigger with longer legs and arms.
How can,
I'm just saying that he is saying, like, it's just bullshit. Like, he's not saying anything.
in other words, how can I live a better life? How can I make things more even, more stable for my family?
Yeah, this is like psychological talk. This is how you can influence people by like this kind of communication. That's what goes under the skin.
Family, how and what am I up against? What is happening to me in my life? What is my purpose in life, and so forth? These questions, in actual fact, absorb a tremendous quantity of his energy. And he himself is not able to go out and do anything very progressive about it. So the best thing for him to do is to go out and do something about it. But he can't do anything about it because he is so immersed in this.
What? That is not true. These are the driving forces. That's what makes us do things. That we are looking for a purpose in life. He's saying the exact opposite of how things work. You do things because you're in love with your wife. You do things because you want to make money. You do things because you love your children and you want to provide as much help for them to grow up in a healthy environment as possible. You do things because you're looking for the purpose. You do things because you're trying to figure out what is this nonsense around you, and you want to make sense out of it. But you do things.
But he can't do anything about it because he is so immersed in this. So actually, in Scientology process,
That's depression.
he resolves these questions. He understands what he's doing. He knows what he wants to do. He makes up his mind and he goes ahead and does it. And he turns from a man who is simply a puzzled, static being into somebody who is more dynamic, who is able to accomplish something.
At this point, he pivoted to Scientology.
Yeah, I don't believe this.
And he made the argument that this whole process is a religion, not a science. With this came his idea to monetize, charging at the time $500 for an entire 24 hours of auditing. This created a wave of churches
It's basically placebo, right? Oh God.
being formed across the world, including the central headquarters that was then in Washington, D.C. When speaking about Scientology, words like faith and belief are often avoided.
Oh, one more thing. What Scientology does is they use the everyday terms in a twisted way. For example, one of the key things that drove me crazy back then was the word technology. Whenever they were supposed to say technique doesn't mean technology. Technology is like the level of tools that you have, I guess. Technique is the way how you do things. When they were teaching me how to teach, they kept saying this is the teaching technology. And I tried correcting them at first, but them using this word so terribly had a massive impact on my brain. I worked there for more than half a year, and so let me continue the story just a little bit, okay? So what happened is that I started working, I got a group, and it worked out really well. The students really liked the way how I was teaching. They were like prepared materials for every single lesson that you had to follow. You couldn't deviate from them. That's where the different sentence patterns were. Today we started with this pattern, and then you play this game with the students, then you teach another pattern and you do some drilling and so on. Lessons were really long. The students generally really enjoyed these things because they were very easy to absorb, to like learn. But everything was really strict. You really had to follow these things. And so what happened is that at first, for like the first few months, in the first like 3 months, I followed them at first very strictly. And then as I saw that my students were still terrified by the idea of actually trying to speak English with somebody who was not one of them, one of the group members, but like someone outside of the group, like some foreigners on the street and so on, I realized that teaching sentence patterns, it can be useful, it makes the students calmer, but on the other hand, it's an absolutely bad idea because what you want the students to do is learn the vocabulary, learn the grammar, and combine it as like an infinite Lego puzzle. So they're able to create their own sentences, they're able to express themselves freely. That is what your goal is. And it didn't work. Like the sentence patterns just didn't work. They did not progress. They learned the words, but the moment I asked a little bit different thing, they totally collapsed. They could only rely on the patterns. And that was terrible. So what I did was, over time, I deviated from the materials. I started bringing in my own sources. I brought in like National Geographic articles sometimes. There's a fantastic page that National Geographic has, NG Life, that's the name of it. There's a lot of awesome readings and grammar explanations there. I started kind of using that. And so what happened is that by the end of the 6th month, they got really mad at me for not using their materials, even though the students were very glad and were very happy about it, and they actually started forming sentences that things were working out. At the end of like every week or second week, the students could evaluate the teachers, and my scores were always in like the top. So they really enjoyed the way how I taught them. Also, one more thing. This was like a small language studio. I'm sorry, like I keep remembering things that I wanted to share. So this was like a small language studio or language school. And since I had these really good scores, the school kept pushing students on me. Like out of the 50 students, let's say, I had like 30 something, 30, 35, 38. There were other teachers, like 4 or 5 more teachers, and they had only like 2, 3, or 4 students in their groups. And I had a shitload of students, and multiple groups. They saw that the students wanted to learn from me, but I absolutely deviated from the way how the school was supposed to work. And so at the end of the 6th month, they figured this out. And I was also pissed because I had to work so much. So I was like, they basically kind of like fired me, but we both agreed that this is not gonna happen. So I left. Oh, and I'm really happy about it because they did really weird stuff for 6 months. Like one day when I was going to my room to teach, I saw one of my bosses with like 3 or 4 employees there, just sitting there and throwing money into the air. I was like, what's happening? Are you okay? And they said that this brings them more money and good luck. Like, okay. And there were little signs of Scientology, and they kept like occasionally talking about it, but they never really tried pulling me in after they kind of realized that I'm not necessarily the best candidate for that. I hope you enjoyed my little story.
The third level of OT involves a major discovery that Hubbard discovered after Scientology had been founded. While people reaching this level have signed confidentiality agreements, some of these documents have been released to the public, and it tells a story that again causes a pretty major controversy. Okay, bear with me. 75 million years ago, an ancient being called Xenu was a dictator of something called the Galactic.
I love how this is from South Park, right? I think this is from South Park. Oh, there was an episode, yeah, about Scientology. That was hilarious. So this is the origin story.
Ago, an ancient being called Xenu was a dictator of something called the Galactic Confederacy. He brought humans to Earth, dropped them into volcanoes, and killed them, releasing their thetans into the environment. These thetans are angry and upset, causing us now to be infected and affected by these negative emotions. To overcome these negative emotions from this traumatic event is how you can reach OT level 3, but it's dangerous. L. Ron Hubbard claims that it's a tough thing to do, and many illnesses might plague people attempting to conquer it. The church itself doesn't enjoy the telling of the story, and will go out of its way to block its telling. So if this video disappears, or if I go missing, that may be the reason why. This story was the focus of an episode of South Park centering on Scientology.
What is the most secret part of Scientology or thing that they worry about leaking?
Well, you know that stuff about the aliens and the volcanoes?
I don't know what that, no, what is that?
Oh, God.
Because they know that it's nonsense.
It's like the whole basis of Scientology.
Yeah, well, you don't know about that when you're in Scientology until you reach a certain level. Like, you have to receive a certain amount of training and counseling, and it can take years.
One more thing that I had as an impression when I was there is that I had this feeling that they tried wiping out the control that you had over your own mind. Not brainwashing you necessarily, but making you rely on them and their guidance.
Then, you know, the public Scientologist has to pay a lot of money before they get there.
The total to get to this point through the process of auditing is around $100,000. If you don't become enlightened and don't solve these life mysteries, you must pay to try the process again.
By the way, most Scientologists don't even get to this.
Most
don't.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because you have to be wealthy to get to this.
Not only do you have to be wealthy, but a lot of times what they do, the new scam is you got to go, you get to a level and then they go, we messed that up, you have to go back down at your expense.
Well, the church doesn't come out and discuss Xenu.
They just want to get rid of the person's independent thought and basically condition you into a mindless drone with prepared answers to any situation. I think that is the case. When the client is surprised or the believer is surprised, they become aggressive, I think, because that's the point where something collapses in them. Their entire wiped out personality collapses. Wonder how much Tom Cruise has paid. He's at the Uber level.
In this incident, volcanoes do feature prominently on the covers of Dianetics. Now, another controversy arrives in the form of taxes, and if Scientology should actually be considered a religion by the IRS. The IRS tried to claim back taxes in the 60s, but the church responded with thousands of lawsuits against the IRS, resulting in about 25 years of back and forth litigation. eventually resulting in the decision that Scientology was indeed a church and exempt from taxes.
Back to Tom Cruise. He hasn't paid for a long time. He's basically number 2 in Scientology now, after David Miscavige, the current head of the church.
Now, by the time this landmark decision was made, L. Ron Hubbard had passed away. The church's official statement was that he no longer needed his physical body, but he continued to write and research without it. This was in 1986, and a man named David Miscavige took over the church. A lot of claims have come out against Miscavige, including violence and abuse towards church members, but nothing has been substantiated.
Of course.
Something notable that happened around the time of the leadership change was the rise in the celebrity Scientologists, prime examples to help recruit others. First came John Travolta, then Tom Cruise, and they are the 2 most well-known. But many other Hollywood types came to Scientology, able to pay for these auditing sessions that would relieve them of past traumas. But what people don't think about is that these auditing sessions, essentially counseling, covering their deepest, darkest secrets, are all kept in records. So each member of the church has a file that can be used at any time to either discredit them or blackmail them. This might be the reason that people stay in the church or don't tell the truth when asked. Now, this is already a long video, but if you're interested in more supposed testimony, there are a few documentaries that go into much more depth, including Going Clear, available now on HBO. So as you can see, this is complicated. An international network that is given religious status in the US, but other countries it's defined as a dangerous cult.
I think not in Hungary. I don't think in Hungary it is defined as a dangerous cult.
US, but other countries it's defined as a dangerous cult. We've got former members of the church claiming some horrible things, but there is no evidence.
And I guess they might have been threatened, who knows?
They believe in the immortal soul and its endless capability, but beyond that are some pretty bizarre extraterrestrial origins that people can find difficult to believe. In the
And that's the least of the problem with them.
comments, let me know your thoughts about Scientology, and we'll see you next week for another What Is video.
Honestly, I didn't even know a lot of these things that were mentioned in the video. But at least now you know my own story that is related to Scientology. Hey, thanks for watching this video with me. We're gonna have more reactions on the channel because I enjoy doing them. Anyways, you know what's very real and cool and awesome? It is PoE 2.